Hi, everyone. Welcome to this episode of the AI Monetization Podcast. I'm Binny, the co founder of Project Pro. As you know, in this podcast, we speak with industry leaders on what kind of ROI and business outcomes they are seeing with AI. No one better to talk to us about this today than Kevin Laughridge. Kevin is a principal at Deloitte. At Deloitte, Kevin is the lead alliance partner for Alphabet, Google. Kevin heads all the go-to-market strategies when it comes to Google Cloud and all of the Google businesses. And previously, Kevin led the AI practice inside the financial services unit at Deloitte. He's been doing this for over 20 years. Welcome to this, Kevin. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Benny. I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you. Kevin, in your extensive experience, you've seen a couple of pretty profound technological waves or revolutions, SaaS, mobile, cloud, AI being the latest. I'm curious, what have you seen changing and what has not changed in all of these things?
Absolutely. The what has not changed is business. So with Deloitte, we're very focused on making sure that we understand what our clients' business, what their business processes are, how they make money, and how they derive value out of it. And so that has not changed. We will still end up a bank's business model. It's still a bank's business model. It's been that way for the last 30 years when we've been doing technology. It will be the way that they will do business in the next 20 years. What is changing is how technology can enable that. So you provided a great landscape of areas, whether it's SaaS. I would add workflow and the enterprise workflow tooling that we've talked about. There was 7 or 8 years ago, we talked about robotics and how robotics was going to be the silver bullet for process optimization. Yeah. I'd say today, with what we're doing with AI, the biggest differentiator is that it's not as brittle as some of the other prior technologies were when it looks at processes and how it can support them. So if you go look at many of our companies, they've already identified if we have a number of people doing a very rote type of process, how we can use technology to solve it. So what do we have left today is exception-based processing primarily, and things that require an additional set of reasoning, which is where AI is really coming into play. And so if we look at the agents in an agentic future, those agents have a reasoning component. And now we have an ability to actually take some of these exception-based processes and start to apply technology to it. And we can drive efficiencies. And that can be improved quality, that can be better client experience. Sometimes that can be cost savings. And so that's what I think is changing. So we're going to still have similar business processes. We now have a new set of tooling with AI that actually drives change. And that change is not as brittle.
Very interesting. So just to make sure I understand, Kevin, you were saying that in the previous generation of RPA kind of automation, those were fairly brittle workflows, but that is probably level 1 of automation. And wherever things are brittle, AI comes in with its level of reasoning to kind of make it less brittle. That's what you were saying?
It is. That's correct.
Very interesting. So one of the things we hear, Kevin, is that one of the challenges with AI in enterprises is reliability. How do you see the brittleness and the reliability kind of, is it getting fixed very rapidly as we speak with all the advancements we are seeing with the reasoning models?
I see. So 18 months ago, when I started working on AI with financial services, we had a lot of dialogue around hallucinations. And so to your point, and how AI is being evaluated, the models have gotten substantially better, which is actually one of those things, and I'll go off on a tangent for a moment. Just the technology today compared to 18 months ago is incredible in how fast it's improving. So in another 18 months, it can be the leap can be even further. That said, back to your question on AI responsiveness and quality, we have an ability now with guardrails, along with continued testing and continued evaluation of what the model output is, to understand if we're getting actually quality outputs.
Yeah.
And many of my clients, and where we're actually driving proofs of concept and moving towards production, we're getting places where we're at a similar level of quality as what a human can do. And so
Mhm.
humans are not infallible. They have
Mhm.
challenges as well. And so if we evaluate a human in a process, we're somewhere in the 94 to 96%, I'd say is what I
Mhm.
typically have seen in my experiences. We can get there with AI,
Mhm.
but it does require continuous monitoring. It
Mhm.
requires continuous testing, et cetera. And those are things that we
Mhm.
build into the process. And
Mhm.
now that said, that's not cheap. And so it's not one of these things where we can take AI as a tooling, simply replace what a human is doing without
Mhm.
having a lot of other capabilities. And so that's what we
Yeah.
do is we really look at using AI as an accelerant for individuals.
Yeah.
We still keep a fair amount of human in the loop. We make sure
Mhm.
that there is good guardrails around it
Yeah.
because the technology does need those guardrails yet.
Okay, that's fantastic. It's very, very encouraging to hear that. I think a lot of people will be very happy with 95, 96, 97% accuracy. Uh, could you help us understand, in your role as lead alliance partner for Alphabet Google, what are your priorities and mandates that you focus on?
Sure. It's very simple. It's
Mhm.
driving client impact with Google.
Mhm.
So our
Yeah.
goal is always been with Deloitte, which is how do we help our clients achieve their business objectives
Mhm.
faster?
Mhm.
Um, what we do with Google is I do that exact same thing, but I use Google technology together with Deloitte to actually do this. And so
Mhm.
the artificial intelligence wave has been fantastic.
Yeah.
One of the reasons that I'm very excited about Google is they own the entire stack, whether it starts with their Ironwood TPUs all the way up
Yeah.
through data, up through the models with Gemini, into their UI layer with AgentSpace, which is the new launch, and all of that
Yeah.
sits on a platform.
Mhm.
What that allows them to do is really see feedback and improve the feedback loop or take that feedback loop and they can make improvements into that entire platform faster. And so we get better results. That's why we're seeing Gemini 2.5 come out. We're
Mhm.
seeing all of the multimodal capabilities that Google has, and they're starting to accelerate. From my
Mhm.
perspective, what Deloitte can do is using those tools, we have the expertise on business capabilities. We can together partner to actually go drive that value for our clients. And that's really what we're about.
Yeah, sounds like a very amazing partnership, tech and business outcomes put together. You recently announced, this partnership with Google Cloud and ServiceNow around agentic AI capabilities with 100 plus pre-built agents automating workflows. Could you kind of talk to us more about that partnership?
Absolutely. So
Yeah.
if you were next a couple of
Mhm.
weeks ago with Google,
Yeah.
they came out and talked a lot about AgentSpace. And Deloitte has been
Mhm.
working with Google on their overall Vertex AI platform plus AgentSpace. And so we've built 100 agents that work on Google to do
Mhm.
things for our
Mhm.
business, for our clients. In
Yeah.
addition to that, was to your point, we've announced that we're working with Google and with ServiceNow and other ISVs on an agent to agent protocol. And
Mhm.
that allows individual agents to communicate with other third party agents. And so,
Mhm.
why that's important from my perspective,
Mhm.
all of our clients have a dynamic IT ecosystem. They're using ServiceNow, they might be using other ISVs. We need to make sure that we can't replace all of those. In fact, we wouldn't want to replace all those. We want to make sure that we're leveraging the domain expertise in which those providers enable. But at the same point in time, they have to communicate with others. And that's why the agent to agent protocol, we're very excited about it. Similar to, I would say, a discussion I had probably 15, 20 years ago was the enterprise workflow tool. We would always have these discussions around, do I need one workflow tool or multiple workflow tools? And where we really would typically land is you would have an enterprise workflow tool, and then you'd have specific workflow tools that worked on individual areas that had a specific need, like in banking for anti-money laundering, or it could be fraud. We're going to have the same thing with agents. And so these
Mhm.
agents need to be able to talk together, just like
Mhm.
humans today in different departments talk together. And so that A to A protocol with Google, we're
Yeah.
very excited because we believe that will end up being the backbone of the
Mhm.
agentic future. And we can
Mhm.
stitch together all of these agents to really get back to deriving client value.
Amazing. And for an enterprise, when they look at Deloitte and Google's suite of these 100 plus pre-built agents, uh, Are these agents like 40% ready-made, or are they 60% ready-made? How much more customization would they require to complete a end-to-end workflow inside a company usually?
Right. They are anywhere ranging from
Mhm,
50% ready-made to
mhm,
100% ready-made. And it really depends on the use case. As you
mhm,
know,
mhm.
um, every company has a finance department, but
Yeah.
how some things that finance department does can be
Mhm,
different based upon the client. And so
yeah.
we've built these agents to be, I would say, lowest common denominator, and they're a good jumping off point to actually
Yeah.
help. In other
Mhm,
places, as an example, we have Document AI, where we actually can take a document that's filled with unstructured data and pull
mhm,
that data right out of it. That's a
mhm.
that's a pretty consistent use case that lots of companies have. So that agent
Yeah.
actually already works, and we can bring it in, and it's pretty close to being ready. So it
Mhm,
really is a mix based upon which domain, whether it's procurement, whether it's in finance, customer experience, that we actually have
mhm,
and we can use. But the reason we did these is
mhm,
to show how it's possible to quickly innovate and
mhm,
use AI in existing companies without needing to
mhm,
redo all kinds of processes.
mhm. Yeah. That sounds like a very powerful model, going there with a suite of ready-made capabilities that can be customized to each end customer. Yeah. And one thing I was curious was, uh, are there specific kinds of enterprises for whom a Google Cloud makes more sense than the other hyperscalers, like a ICP, an ideal customer profile for Google Cloud? Does that exist?
So, one of the things I'll say is
Uh-huh.
Google is more than just cloud. And so I think that
Mhm,
even if you look at all of the hyperscalers that are out there and who's
mhm,
doing the most, they end up having their niches and what really
mhm,
makes sense to them. Google is while their cloud is industry leading and absolutely capable, Google is far advanced on data and analytics and what is built
mhm.
in, whether that's BigQuery and their capabilities there and Looker.
Right.
They clearly have it on AI. And so I I am actually and then the other thing I'd say is even beyond that, Google security and their suite of cyber
Right.
services really work exceptionally well in multi-cloud and even clouds that are not Google. Like
Mhm,
that is a fantastic platform and one that we're really engaging with a lot of clients on. So I see a future where it's
mhm.
not I pick one partner, one hyperscaler, and I stick with it. I see a
Yeah.
future where we have a poly cloud environment for everyone,
Mhm.
and we start to land our workloads based
Yeah.
upon what that capability is. And my
Mhm.
vision is Google continues to be the AI cloud because
Yeah.
that's where they have incredible domain expertise. So even
Yeah.
if you don't use your data isn't all landed on Google, you can still get the greatest capabilities around AI and data and analytics
Yeah.
by leveraging Google with your existing cloud.
Nice. Great. And just switching gears a little bit, Kevin, what does it take to build successful strategic alliances at the scale of a Google and Deloitte? What are some best practices there?
The first thing I'd say is trust. So um, I find alliances that work well for everybody is
Mm,
when there's a trusted relationship and we're
mm,
very clear what our goals are. So,
mm,
from my perspective, Deloitte starts from the practice of we want to make great client impact.
mm,
That's it. At the end of the day, if our clients believe, and I hope they do, that we have their best interests in mind to
mm,
help them achieve their business values,
mhm,
that's really what Deloitte's been built on. So we communicate with Google and we demonstrate this is what we're really focused. And Google, one of the reasons why I believe Deloitte and Google work extremely well together is that they're also focused on how do they deliver the best value for their clients. And
mhm,
that's where we partner. And
mhm,
so that trust then goes to from the highest level, how do we deliver the best thing for our clients down to
mhm,
what are the deals that we're partnered with? But it's back to trust and open communication and agreed upon value of what we're going to do together.
mhm.
The other thing is, I've talked about it before, but Deloitte brings the business expertise. We call it our industry advantage. And
Yeah.
Google knows that that is one of the things that we bring and they expect it
Mhm.
from us. And so
Yeah.
their teams, when they talk to our teams, we make sure that we all align back to what is Deloitte's industry advantage and how do we leverage Google tooling to do the best capability to drive against that. Um, the world has changed and it will
Mhm,
continue to.
mhm.
Software and engineering is injected into every single business process that's out there. And so I
Yeah,
think that as Deloitte, we continue to see that and know that we need to continue to partner with the best technology providers that are out there, and Google's one of them.
perfect. And when you jointly go to enterprise customers, um, is it different with AI compared to the previous technological waves? Which uh, is it the case that earlier you were mostly speaking with the CTO, the tech org? Now, given that AI is so much of business logic in it, there is more business leaders involved in the conversation. Is that the case or not really? Is that the same as before?
Great, great question, Binny.
Mhm.
And I'd say it absolutely is where it continues to go. So
Okay.
to your point, when it
Mhm,
was the 15 years ago, let's just talk cloud. It was
mhm,
primarily to the CIO and CTO and said, you
mhm.
don't really want to run your data center business anymore. We can help you with that. And by the way, here's all these value added capabilities. As we go today and we talk about AI, it is important to talk to the CIO and CTO and talk about the great capabilities that in the tooling that can support the client. But at the
Yeah.
same point in time, it's talking to the chief operating officer and
Mhm,
it's talking to the chief strategy officer and it's talking to
mhm,
the chief HR officer to
mhm.
discuss here are toolings that actually help your staff and your
Yeah.
people achieve their goals better and faster,
Yeah.
and make that partnership. And so it is a bit of a different dialogue. It does go back to why I think it's a strength for Deloitte, because it really gets back to the chief operations officer. Here's how we can do operations in an improved way with a new set of tooling, and that's one of the things that we think brings value.
Yeah. Yeah. A couple of weeks back, we had the COO of a very large West Coast-based freight company on the podcast, and it was very interesting to listen to problems from his lens, which is, it's very business first, and AI is one component of that workflow, and how he thinks about very problem first, business first. The whole problem-oriented way of doing it. It was very interesting to listen to that way of looking at it. Um, and earlier you mentioned agent space a couple of times, Kevin. Could you just help us understand a little more on what agent space is and possible applications of agent space?
Absolutely. So
Yeah.
AgentSpace is a new application and tool
Mhm,
from Google. My words, it is the single pane of glass for employees to use agents. It comes
mhm,
with enterprise search capability. So if you think about Google and where they came from, is they organized the internet. And agent space number one takes that capability, puts it within the firewall of
mhm,
a company, and grounds
mhm,
all of their search results on employee only data. It
mhm.
also integrates to make sure that the employee that's doing that job and doing the search, it actually only gives them access to data that they would typically have. So it integrates within a user profile. But what also is really exciting about it is that there's an ability to build agents. So employees can
Mhm.
build their own task specific agents and integrate with other third party agents and actually call it. And so where I view agent space is starting to go is to be that first launching point for an employee when they come in and they'll say, as an example, if I'm a working in the service desk, and I
Yeah.
say, what are my first sets of IT service tickets I need to work, and I can ask AgentSpace, and it pulls data in from Jira in this example, and helps me actually start to not just identify what are the tickets, but also actually start to answer what those tickets need, and I can take actions within it. And so if I say I think of it as it's a new box on an enterprise architecture that doesn't really exist today. Because
Mhm,
today I walk in and I have a desktop. And my desktop,
mhm.
I actually go to the application where I would start. Maybe that's the intranet. Now we're really viewing agent space as potentially that new place that employees come in and start doing work. And that work is augmented and accelerated by all of these agents that companies will build and be able to instantiate.
Very interesting. Um, One of the things that you had shared on your LinkedIn was a lot of senior leadership is looking to get clarity on how to navigate the AI landscape and kind of just pick the things that are relevant to them. Um, do you have some best practices or guidelines on how do they pick or rank projects based on ROI, or is that even the right metric to think about?
I think ROI is incredibly important.
Mhm,
And it's, from my view, one of the top rankings.
mhm,
But the return is where we can
mhm,
actually have a great dialogue about what lever do we use and what do
mhm,
we define. Because ROI doesn't always mean I'm going to spend $10 and get $100 back. It might mean I'll spend $10 and I'll get a variety of points back on net promoter score, or it might be I see a quality impact. And so I think it's really important to talk about make sure we're clear from the beginning about what
mhm,
return are we looking for. It's not
mhm,
always just investment.
mhm,
Um, so if I go back to, and I say 18 months ago, the conversation on AI started very much on per use case and what use
mhm,
case do I actually build? And the
mhm,
challenge was every one of those use cases, if we consider it one by one, end up
mhm,
being relatively expensive. Where
mhm,
we're going is how do I think about AI as a platform? And therefore, how do I build a platform where I can put lots of use cases against it and get my cost per use case actually down lower because I get efficiencies of scale? While I do that, I also work with my business owners on those processes and those use cases to say, what's the value? So back to your point on ROI. And so as an example, we've done some in banking operations, and the return, what we were looking for was actually speed. And so the
mhm.
cost didn't matter as much as we needed to respond with quality at a high rate of speed. And that's where we are actually evaluating if I got 50% time back on the process.
Mhm.
And we weren't as concerned about how much it actually costs to run because we needed to prioritize speed. In other
Yeah.
instances, like in contact center, um, how quickly a contact center agent can get information to then be able to have the dialogue with the customer in a more focused way. And so it wasn't just I need to reduce the call time. It was actually I need to improve my call quality. And they actually cared less in this instance about pure call speed to handle time and cared more about having a good dialogue with the customer and having the overall scores of the contact center go up in terms of satisfaction. And so I do think each one of these use cases, our best practice is as you define the use case, make sure you capture what expected value is, and then make sure we set some guardrails about what success looks like.
Mhm.
And continuously test that and evaluate after it goes into production, and then even periodically post go live to make sure we're getting the value we expect out of it.
Makes sense. And once you have prioritized use cases and they start going into production, what are some of the biggest challenges that you've seen as these use cases roll out live to production?
Um, Going from proof of concept to production, I'll just focus there to start with, is not
Sure.
easy. And in
Mm,
fact, because this is new technology, we also have to
mhm,
have new groups of people. So ML ops is a really important function that needs to be there to make sure that we're actually evaluating, continuously evaluating our large language models. And I say
yeah.
models plural because we do expect you will have many of them. Are we getting the anticipated results? How do we ensure that we're monitoring risk associated with these components? So just going POC, which is POCs are pretty easy to spin up, to production,
Mm,
it's hard. Once we actually get to production, not just continuously evaluating the value, but also the change management of the teams that are working with the AI. Is it actually
yeah.
delivering what was expected in terms
Mhm,
of results? Are we monitoring, looking for, we talked about hallucinations earlier, but are we continuously getting the right outputs we would expect? So there needs to be user experience or user feedback loops that are provided,
mhm,
like a thumbs up or a thumbs down. Do we like the
mhm,
answer?
mhm,
We have to have some level of telemetry that's associated with
mhm,
each of these different agents so that we can monitor usage and quality that's there. So all of that
mhm.
wraps into we can't just turn it on and just let it run. We really need to turn
Yeah.
it on and have a team that manages it and monitors that. And those
Mhm,
teams can actually be different. And so part of this whole process of injecting AI into a company is evaluating what teams are going to monitor these capabilities and manage them and then continue to take ownership of it.
makes sense. Um, In the earlier version of AI, which was kind of called data science a few years back, one of the challenges companies usually face was the quality of data and stuff like that. Now, in the Gen AI flavor of AI, given the probabilistic nature and given the unstructured nature of this data, is that still as big a deal or not really today, the data problem?
I think the data problem is a bigger deal than it used to be because
I see.
to your point on machine learning,
Mhm.
we and those teams typically had a problem that they were using machine learning
Mhm.
to solve.
Mhm.
And therefore, that problem had a defined set of data. It could be very large, but at least we knew
Mhm.
the data was in there. We're
Right.
now taking these new agents and deploying them across the
Right.
enterprise. And so the data sets have an ability to be incredibly broad. Um,
Mhm.
I see most of the work will still end up being data modernization. So
Mhm.
yes, AI can. Then the good news is we can leverage these agents to actually improve that data modernization journey.
Yeah.
You mentioned unstructured data. I see
Mhm.
that as a gold mine for companies. So I've worked a
Mhm.
lot with banks. They have a lot of PDFs running around, whether it's contracts, those things which those unstructured data components in those contracts used to sit, we'll just say, in a shared drive. And then we had individuals that actually retype what happened in the contract into a system, and then we would
Mhm.
report off the system. We now have an ability to use this unstructured contract as the golden source of data. So I think that's really incredible. But at the same
Yeah.
time, we can't leave it in some shared drive and pull from there. So this
Right.
whole data monetization journey I see as even more important.
Mhm.
And candidly, I think that will be the bottleneck to actually getting AI injected throughout the enterprise because AI is fueled by data. It is what is
Mhm.
needed to make it work well. We need to make
Mhm.
sure it's well structured, organized, and actually accessible.
Mhm.
That's where a lot of the work is going to end up being.
Okay. And when you are productionizing these use cases, how often are you just using foundational models the way they are, and how often are they being fine-tuned, and how much of that fine-tuning is heavy duty? How long does it take? Um,
Yeah. So great question. And
mhm.
I hate to give you the consulting answer of it depends, but
Mhm.
unfortunately, by use case, it will
Yeah.
depend.
Mhm.
Um, we have some use cases that
Mhm.
we use the foundational model. We ground it within the enterprise data, and we get
Yeah.
great answers that are consistent.
Mhm.
I have other instances in which we get fair answers out of the foundational model, and we actually need to start to do fine tuning. I
Yeah.
try to avoid fine tuning as much as we can. So we would
Mhm.
prefer to move towards um, prompt engineering and leveraging prompts to improve the quality before we get into the fine tuning component. Because as you know, that gets expensive. And so
Yeah.
one of the things that we really get back to if we go to our ROI is how do I A, not build a lot of tech debt, and B,
Mhm.
how do make sure um, make sure that if a use case needs fine tuning,
Yeah.
we actually get the value out of that fine tuning versus do we
Mhm.
go look else?
Mhm.
But it's definitely necessary. And candidly, not just foundational models. We will take use cases and actually use different models based upon the different use case that's there. Some of them are better for coding. Some of them are better for math. Some of them are better for actually writing executive level presentations. And
Mhm.
so a lot of that goes into that conversation.
Nice. And are there one or two use cases that come to your mind, recent ones, where AI has had a pretty powerful impact on enterprises that you could share?
Sure. I'll talk about one of my favorites that Deloitte built.
Yeah.
And the reason I like it is because it's not just a single use case, it's the process. So
Mhm.
we have something that we built called AI Assist. And what it
Okay.
does is it accelerates the entire software development lifecycle. So
Mhm.
there's a lot of excitement about AI doing coding, but coding is only part of the SDLC lifecycle. And in fact,
Yeah.
from a developer perspective, it's like less than 30% of their time
Mhm.
where people spend and Deloitte engineers and our team spend a lot of time is all the way from a business requirement through the actual coding and testing. And so that's what AI Assist does. It is multiple use cases throughout it. So it starts with a business requirement.
Mhm.
We can actually take it and create architectural diagrams from the requirement. And so that's something that everybody does today. We would take a
Yeah.
requirement, we would start to draw the actual architecture diagrams. we use AI to give us our first pass at that. And now, rather than starting with a
Nice.
blank whiteboard, we have something
Mhm.
that we're starting. Other thing it does is our use case, we have an ability to go and pull the backlog of all the other user stories that were done in Jira. And so if
Mm.
there's a specific type of logging capability that we use, rather than relying on subject matter expertise, we're allowing AI to go look at past stories that worked well and inject
Mhm.
that into the story that's being developed. So now
Yeah.
we're trying to actually reduce the subject matter expertise or the key person problem that is
Mm.
associated with it. That then takes it into breaking down into steps and user stories, which we then inject into the IDE. So I used to
Mhm.
be a developer a lot many years
Mhm.
ago.
Mhm.
And one of the things we never had was we never had a requirement that went from the requirement repository or the user story repository into the IDE and had a connection. It all sat within the developer's head. And so now what again, is that saving time? No,
Mhm.
but what it's doing is it's improving our quality of our code. It's improving the quality of the process. Then we have
Mhm.
positive and negative test cases that actually get developed from it. Again,
Mhm.
when I was a developer and I would write user stories, we oftentimes focused on test cases, but we wouldn't do all of them. This actually now starts to build out a much larger repository of test cases per requirement.
Yeah.
All of that stuck together is
Mhm.
giving us higher quality code at
Mm.
about faster timeframes. But it's less about how do I just pure efficiency. It's really about how do we get higher quality, more compliance with our processes that have been put in place, and overall, it's a much better product and output.
Very interesting. So almost like a quasi AI project manager um, kind of workflows embedded in there.
It is, and it's a going back to we took an entire process and
Yeah.
said, how do I use AI throughout the whole thing versus
Mhm.
again, where much of what I saw the world started 18 months
Yeah.
ago of single
Mhm.
use cases. The value we're going to get out of AI is when we take an entire process and agentify all of it because we get
Right.
little pieces and parts together that when you add it up,
Mhm.
actually have a
Mhm.
pretty good return.
Yeah. Now, this seems like a fantastic use case because for the longest time, the holy grail for lots of engineering leaders was how do I get my team to follow best practices and quality guidelines? And this
Yes,
basically automates all of that.
it certainly helps.
Yeah. Yeah. Uh, do you? I mean, since you're at the frontier of what's happening with AI, do you have like a contrarian take on where things will head in a few years with AI?
I don't think that I have a contrarian take. I will
Mhm.
say that, getting AI built and viewed as positive within a enterprise technology environment,
Mhm.
we're on our way. We're
Mhm.
getting there. It's going to take a little bit longer. Um, I I question some of the statements of we're not going to, the number of jobs is going to be substantially less. Like, I think there's a good reason that technology continues to elevate the human experience and continues to create new and better jobs. I still think
Mhm.
that will happen with artificial intelligence. I
Mhm.
I think there will be places where agents talk to agents, but I don't foresee where agents only talk to agents and don't have any interaction with humans ever. Sure, there's going to be some rote processes they'll do it, but does this thing completely change the workforce? I don't know, Benny. I don't know if that's going to happen for 10 years. And then who knows what happens after 10 years? The entire world has different shifts. So, again, I don't think that's contrarian. I just think we will see the same type of technology uptake, whatever that technology is, will be applied to AI as well.
Yeah. That's very encouraging that we humans will always find something to do and we'll stay in there. Yeah. Uh, and what kind of impact? And you mentioned a little bit about AI and coding and the workflows around it. Uh, do you think the way people learn and upskill and get coached will change meaningfully? What impact do you see there on the workforce in terms of skilling and learning?
Yeah, I think so. I've been a big proponent that most of our most people and companies will benefit by learning data and analytics.
Mm.
And I mean that as simply from being able to use Excel and do pivot tables and do some basic reporting. I don't think I'm talking data scientist level. I think that's still going to be the case. I think we will still benefit by people to understand data and analytics and what's happening. Data is, people talk about data being the oil. I view data as one of the a priority asset for a company, and having everybody understand that asset, I think, is really important. Whether that's an operational task, whether that's in sales task, like the more that you understand things that are happening and the data below it, the better decisions you can end up making. And I really mean that as any person across the company will benefit from that. So I think data and analytics as a foundational capability is really important. And I think that as, same thing as we teach people English, I think they need to learn data fundamentals. And I think that will continue. AI will actually will support accelerating that from my perspective, because, even though we can talk to artificial intelligence engines with natural language, you still benefit by understanding some of the data fundamentals.
True, very true. And finally, Kevin, the last thing I'm curious about is, like you said, you started off as a developer and you grew your career to lead. What are some tips for people getting out of college, getting into a role like yours to navigate a successful career for the next 10, 15, 20 years?
Sure. I'll say, Binny, I never had a great plan. I just simply approached every problem and every client situation as I can learn something from it. And then take what I learned and apply it to the next thing. And so much of consulting, as you know, is going from one project to another. And you take learnings from one project and you apply to the next place. And those learnings can be data and analytics. It can be how to work with lots of different people. It can be understanding different industries. So my view is I've always tried to take a parcel or a nugget of information from every project and then bring that to the next piece and help shape my career. And so who I am today is far different than I was 20 years ago when I started with Deloitte. But I think that should be the case for everybody. You just grow and evolve. And I will say, having a technology background has benefited me because the world has turned to technology. And as I mentioned, it's injected in every single business process that we have today. And so I came from a bit of a tech background, and then I learned a lot of the business things that went through it. There's an easy way to invert that. And if you understand the business, you can learn the technology, but just learn from each experience and situation. And over the course of 20 years, I've been able to do a lot of different things, and I've enjoyed that.
Excellent, very inspiring. And I'm sure the clients also appreciate having somebody who understands technology at a deep level on the other side in these conversations.
I sure hope so.
Yeah. Well, Kevin, really appreciate you taking time to do this. This was very helpful. I think we all got a very good overview of what's happening at the frontier of AI inside enterprises at Deloitte, at Google. Some great guidance on how to nurture these strategic relationships, some fantastic career guidance, and the use case on AI project management was terrific as well. Thank you so much once again.
Thank you, Binny.